Everybody, my name is Ashley Boland, and welcome to my week to present for our individual policy projects. As you can see, today we're going to be talking about the criminal justice system and some of the implications that it brings and how we as social workers can understand and advocate for change and reform. So let's go ahead and jump right in. Today we're talking about something that I discovered. It's a current proposed federal piece of legislation. It's called the Clean Slate Act. So a little bit of overview about what this bill is that it was introduced on the federal level on April 30th, 2025 by the Democratic Party. This bill requires automatic sealing of nonviolent criminal records. Currently, about 12 states have enacted some form of this bill. States like California, Colorado, Connecticut, Delaware, Michigan, Minnesota, New York, Pennsylvania, Oklahoma, and Virginia. I noticed that there was kind of a variation upon each state in regards to the kind of records that can be sealed, but primarily the records that won't be sealed are violent offenses, sex crimes with minors, homicide, treason, or a national security threat would not be covered under this bill. So why did I choose this issue? I, like many of you, I'm sure, kind of fell down a wormhole of different topics that could be covered in the criminal justice system. I thought about things like juvenile criminal justice, racism, law enforcement, general reform of the criminal justice system. But I kind of found this pattern, noticing these significant things that happened with ex-offenders when they are released. And this pattern is something I've also seen in my profession right now as a case manager. The pattern being that ex-offenders, often when they're released, deal with collateral consequences that prevent them from re-entering society. And by collateral consequences, I mean sanctions and disqualifications that place an unanticipated burden on an individual trying to re-enter society. And it leads them to be isolated from the general society. It also kind of ultimately perpetuates the individual, to fall back into a cycle as they kind of just fail out of re-entering back into society. So a little bit of background first, the definition of recidivism, which plays a significant role, and take note of this as we're going to touch on it and kind of come back. And that means it is the rearrest and reconviction or reincarceration of an ex-offender within a given time frame. Approximately 2 million people in the United States are incarcerated, and within about 3 years of being released, almost 68% of ex-offenders are rearrested. Within 5 years, almost 77% are rearrested. Recidivism harms both the family and the individual and general society. And it promotes these ex-offenders to kind of fail once they're released. It's more difficult when these offenders are released compared to thinking about the general public to do things like gaining employment, secure stable housing, and just generally function in society. These people are stigmatized and they're often viewed as sub-citizens, and they are perpetually punished for their crimes. These restrictions are very systematic and they affect offenders at all levels of society. We can measure a person's successful reentry into society by these 6 basic life needs. And many of these needs are interconnected, things like livelihood, residence, family, health, criminal justice compliance, and social connections. Each of these areas present unique challenges, even though they are somewhat interconnected. On this slide here, I added a photo from the Prison Policy Initiative, and it kind of demonstrates how many people are locked up in the United States. And it breaks down the different levels being local, state, and federal. And there's kind of a variety of charges here, so take a moment and review this image. So some areas of impact in the social policy issue. This is a very relevant topic for social work, as we've seen in the last slide, the magnitude of people that are affected by incarceration. So I wanted to review some more specific areas that an individual might face and might be impeded. As for employment and education, there was a study done in 2002 where more than 200 employers in the Milwaukee area found that formerly incarcerated candidates with nearly identical professional job experience were less than half as likely to receive a job as non-offenders. According to the Bureau of Justice, only 12.5% of employers said they would actually accept an application from an ex-convict, which, ironically, getting back to work would reduce and decrease recidivism, but it's definitely a barrier for ex-convicts finding work. Ex-offenders face these massive obstacles when searching for employment. So when they return to society with this disadvantage, they have very low job prospects. And it increases the likelihood of unemployment. As for family and society, over half of incarcerated adults are parents of minor children, which means they may miss out on their children's critical formative years. Once ex-offenders return home, they're fairly dependent on family members, and they kind of have to overcome years of limited contact with them. It's definitely a change in the household dynamic. According to the Urban Institute of Justice, just before people are released, almost 82% of ex-offenders thought it would be easy to return home and renew family relationships, but after returning home, over half of them reported it was way more difficult than they expected. Family members assume financial and emotional burdens when these ex-offenders return home, and they have to support this dependent adult now. So they face two big adjustments when returning home. There is significantly less structure, and they have fewer social contacts. Prison life is extremely structured, and prisoners with long sentences become very accustomed to the structure. So this results in kind of a feeling of shock and distress when they return to the outside world. Many times when people return home to their families and communities, a lot of their social contacts have kind of gone away, and they may no longer exist. So it's important for these individuals to create new social networks to help them thrive when reentering. Collateral barriers would be fairly significant, in my opinion. Ex-offenders, after their release from prison, are excluded from things like food stamps, very difficult to obtain depending on the variation of charge. They cannot vote. They have an inability to apply for federal grants. Many of them are unable to benefit from public housing like Section 8 or HUD. And it's very difficult to reobtain a driver's license. So you can see how these issues definitely prevent people from thriving. So some connections to our content. Our Social Work Speaks textbook shares with us that the United States has the highest incarceration rate in the world. According to an April 2011 report by the Pew Center, the average national recidivism rate for released prisoners was about 43.3%. Over-incarceration has led to unsustainable costs for the federal and state departments of corrections. Decarceration significantly reduces incarceration populations. There's a major role for social workers to play in decarceration. Efforts have to be effective and sustainable and socially just. Social work is a very well-positioned department and area to lead a charge for smart decarcerization because we are of social just orientation. The Department of Corrections have embraced concepts of developing programs and services designed to assist individuals in reentering society, gaining daily living skills and employment skills that are very much lacking in the current criminal justice system. And this is why I chose the bill that we're looking at, the Clean Slate Act, because this is aimed towards trying to reduce some of these barriers for ex-offenders. So our textbook talked about many different areas that relate social work to criminal justice. In 2016, prominently 90% of inmates were men. 60% of those individuals were from racial minority groups. Our textbook also concludes and confirms that America engages in mass incarceration, and we have the highest incarceration rate, particularly in the South. I included this quote here from our book as I feel like it really encompasses everything I'm trying to shine light on here, and I thought it was very powerful. Another area was discussed in our book being the war on drugs in the 1980s, and demonstrated a deterioration of inner cities accompanied by alarming degrees of social dysfunction. Increased violence led to more arrests of drug users and distributors to already overcrowded prisons. In the year 2000, drug abuse violations accounted for 1 out of every 8 arrests. Our book also talked about some individuals and attempts to reform. People like Dorothea Dix, who was an institutional reformer and sought to make jails more humane. Some more recent presidential contributors to reform would be President George W. Bush in 2007, who signed the Second Chance Act, which allowed prisoners to transfer to halfway houses or homes or detention centers for the last year of their sentence. President Barack Obama in 2010 signed the Fair Sentence Act, which reduced the penalties for selling crack cocaine, and this helped about 12,000 prisoners who stood to have their charges reduced. In 2019, Donald Trump signed the First Step Act, which provided inmates credit for good behavior, reducing their sentences for certain infractions, and this was expected to benefit about 181,000 inmates. I also wanted to share the NASW policy statement and review some of the implications for social work. So social work is a very important and significant stakeholder in efforts to improve reform for the criminal justice system. Social workers are employed in administrative roles and direct service positions throughout all components of the criminal justice system. Social workers should seek to lend a voice to the national dialogue about public safety and reform. The NASW recognizes the importance of providing quality social work interventions and helping to shape the criminal justice standards and policies. They advocate for the provisions of comprehensive biopsychosocial and evidence-based services in hopes to reduce the rate of recidivism and increase the re-entry programs. The NASW strongly advocates for support of major reform and policy change. So what can social workers do to help, and what are some implications for us? We can for sure get involved and advocate for the support and change we want to see within the criminal justice system. Review and inform ourselves of these bills and policies like the Clean Slate Act that could benefit individuals facing recidivism. We want to help reduce barriers, promoting an increased sustainability, facilitating better transitions back to society, and promoting a more economically stable and productive overall society. So the questions I would like everybody to answer, the first one being, this is a situation. Your client has been released from jail from being incarcerated for 10 years. Currently, they have no employment, they have no income, they can't obtain food stamps because of the certain charges they have. They have no housing, and they can't use subsidized housing again, because of the charges they have. They have no local family for support. So what is one thing you would do as a social worker to help advocate and support this client? The second question being, share your opinion on the Clean Slate Act. Is it positive? Is it negative for society? And in your opinion, should there be additional felonies sealed under this bill, like homicide, sex acts with a minor, violent offenses, treason, national security threat? I'm really interested to see everybody's thoughts on this topic. I feel like I'm very passionate about the criminal justice system and helping people navigate these difficulties and reducing barriers. On my last slide here is my references. I wanted to thank everybody for watching my video. I hope it was somewhat beneficial and informative. I've really enjoyed getting to know all of you and working with all of you. I hope we all finish this semester strong. We're almost there, so I appreciate all of you. Thanks for watching.